G'day, I'm Mark Hoth and welcome to Swift Almanac. When I started programming in Swift about 2 years ago, I was a sole developer, but there were many things that I had to learn and I made them by making mistakes. So here's a heads up on stuff that you need to know prior to writing your own code. And for some of those things you can check out my Swift Basics course and that should set you on the right path. Okay, so I'm going to start off with something that is particularly basic, but it's something that took me a while to actually find the answer to, even though I wasn't really looking for it. But many of the data types in the UI kit start with the initials NS, and one in particular is the NS error. Well, if you're wondering what NS stands for and you don't know, it stands for Next Step, which was the operating system that Steve Jobs developed for the Next Step cube after he left Apple the first time and before coming back. And when he came back, Next Step became the current iOS level running under the Unix operating system. And with that, we got lumped with Objective-C as a programming language. So it's basic, but if you're looking back through any old sample code, you'll see a lot of references to data types that commence with NS, particularly NS error. Now, more recently, Apple has been removing these, and so NS error has now become error, and they're removing others along the way as well. So don't be confused. NS error from a year and a half ago is the same as what an error is now. They've just renamed the data type. Number 2 is optionals. Optionals were the bane of my existence, and I think continue to be the bane of my existence. You really need to wrap your head around the fact that an optional is a different data type to what it's optional of. So an optional int is a different data type to an int. And optionals are pretty much next to useless as passing values. You really need, as soon as possible, in my view, to get the optional filled as a real value and then get that value placed into another variable or constant. And so understanding optionals and guard statements is very, very important. So the third thing is inferred data types, which I find terrible. They're bad. And the reason for that is the inference just may not be obvious. It might not be obvious to you as a programmer or to some other programmer who's looking at your code, and you're far better off when you make a variable or constant definition to actually define the data type so that it's there in black and white. It's not that difficult, and it's a shortcut that you really shouldn't take. Unfortunately, there are some cases where even when you defer a data type, the return value is going to become an optional data type, even though the function definition is just a value, or a void, in fact. So just be very, very wary and just try and avoid inferred data types as much as possible. The fourth thing that you need to understand is optional chaining. And in particular, you need to know the difference between as exclamation mark and as question mark. One will cause a crash and the other will not. And that's also very important. So forced optional chaining as exclamation mark should only be used when you know that the test is always going to be successful, and otherwise you should be using as question mark. The fifth thing is dictionaries, as well as understanding how key value pairs work. You should also understand what the definition of any and any object mean, and that's changed over the last couple of versions of Swift. So you may find some old code which needs to be updated for the new compiler. So you just need to be a bit careful of old sample code and making it run under the current Xcode 9. The sixth thing, we're getting progressively harder, but you'll soon see all of these references to delegates, and you'll need to understand what a delegate is. But essentially, a delegate is a protocol that your classes will need to adopt, and when they do that, it's essentially a means for the communications layer to talk to the view layer, or sometimes the model layer to talk to the communications layer. But when you see the word delegate, just think it's a protocol, and then see my tutorial on protocols so you understand what adopting a protocol means. Finally, asynchronous code. You've got to understand that asynchronous code is not running when you want it to run. It's going to run in its own time, and that's going to affect things if you're trying to debug asynchronous code. The other thing you have to understand is multi-threading. iOS has 4 threads, and the main thread is the only one that can process user interface commands. This means that any async command or callback or closure that affects the display or calls a UIKit call needs to be moved to the main thread for execution. And the command to do that is dispatchqueue.main.async followed by the executed closure. So those are my tips, things that you should be wary of, traps that you can fall into. And with that, we will move on to building our developer network. Well, hopefully that will help you to avoid some mistakes and make the development process easier from the very beginning. If you have any questions about the tutorial, then please leave a comment below or hit me up on Twitter @SwiftAlmanac. Please subscribe to the channel, it's free, and check out our website at www.swiftalmanac.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.